Okay, we're live, so
Okay.
you might want to, you can go off camera.
How, like this?
No, you're good. You want to put the camera a little more even with your face, though.
Like
So
to look at it like this?
not looking like you want to be like straight across you, like this. Okay, you're on live now on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay.
Tell me
Welcome,
if
everybody.
I have to move it.
Yeah, you might want to move your camera so it's like more even. Yeah, like a little higher. So you're
Hold it
looking
up.
down at the camera, not like that. Yeah, perfect. That's really good. Okay. So I'm really honored to have Rabbi Stephen Weil here on Schmooz tonight. We're very excited. He's been not only have I worked for Rabbi Weil, but he's been, and not only has my teacher in high school, but Rabbi Weil is a mentor of mine. The amount of lessons that I've learned from him are countless, and the amount that he's taught other people as well, not just myself, about rabbinics, about Jewish leadership is just untold. I don't know if there's a greater mentor out there for people, especially in American Jewry and also Israeli Jewry. Now he takes frequent trips out to Israel, so it's a real honor to have Rabbi Weil with us. Rabbi, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. Very challenging times for all of us.
Very much so. Very much so. And I'm sure that tonight's discussion will hopefully give people some chizuks that they'll have what to think about and growth from it. And one thing I left out of when I described to people who you were, your current role, and I would love if you could explain it. We both work for the OU. I'm low on the totem pole. You're much higher up on the totem pole here at the Orthodox Union. But the Orthodox Union is really one of the major organizations, especially for Orthodox Jewry in the United States and around the world. And I'd love if you could explain what the OU does and your role in the OU.
Yeah, I'll tell you what happens. It's a bad analogy today because the company hasn't done well since the time of Jack Welch. But imagine General Electric. General Electric was a management team that oversaw multiple companies. It was almost larger than many countries. It was almost a global business. The OU we have over 10 different non-for-profits. We'll do their fundraising, their accounting, their technology, their HR. But those non-for-profits, each which has its own management team, each which has its own, its own staff. What we'll do is we'll set up a lay board for each of those. We'll oversee it, and we'll facilitate that it can be the best it can be. And that could be unaffiliated Jews. The JSU movement, that part of NCSY is already over 23,000 students, between 9th and 12th grade. We're on the college campuses at 26 campuses. Yachad deals with developmentally disabled. In Israel, part of the OU Israel, really maybe the main thing that we do is we're in about 13 development towns. We have a program called Makom Balev. Each of those are unique and distinct. Each of those are affecting thousands and thousands of people. But ultimately, our goal is that those who support it and those who gain from it will get the biggest bang for the buck. And what do I mean by that? By having one common system of accounting, of fundraising, of HR, so the money that people, whether it's a foundation or an individual, that they invest in that, they'll get the largest bang for the buck. The money goes into programming and servicing those constituents.
Okay. And what do you do at the OU?
I'm involved in overseeing those, whether it's funding, whether it's working with the staff in the field. I'll give you an example. With the JSU, we're probably in about 270 locations, throughout 12 regions. When it comes to Yachad, we're probably in about 10 to 12 states, the campus, as I mentioned. So as we travel throughout the country, because the original mandate of the OU is we're a network. We're the convener in the network of about 400 congregations. And I'm constantly there in those cities working with those communities. Part of that is funding our operations. Part of that is working with those communities and then working with the staff that services those communities.
That's great. Okay, great. I know I've seen you, whether it's here in Mitzvah Yericho or in Yerushalayim or out in Los Angeles, just in your role, you seem to travel a ton. And I'm sure people all around the world are the beneficiaries of you being away from home and speaking everywhere and supporting the OU staff wherever you go. That's
what's fascinating is, I think this is a function of 2008. Not every young man or young woman wants to be a partner in a law firm or a hedge fund manager or running a private equity fund. Those are great jobs and those are contributing tremendously to society. Today, the human capital that we get of quality young men and young women who want to service, whether it's a developmentally disabled community, whether it is the unaffiliated community, whether it's working with the Orthodox community, we get the blessing of working with them, mentoring them, supporting them, in facilitating their ability to hopefully to transform the future of the Jewish world.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing. Look, first and foremost, you're a rabbi, and you're a big Talmid Chacham, a tremendous scholar. I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and thousands have. And we're standing in as you said, a very challenging time here, especially in our relationship with God. We have this coronavirus, which we don't really fully understand. We don't know why it's happened. We don't know what's happening. A lot of times we understand what, we don't understand the why. Here, everything is sort of in flux. We're not sure of anything. We have this feeling of emptiness. And you're the type of leader that allows people to gain a sense of understanding and again a sense of stability in their lives. And I've seen it personally, whether it's at a house of mourning when you've comforted people. Explain to us what's happening. Help us understand what's happening with the coronavirus here.
Well, look, I first and foremost, I'm not a Navi, and I'm not the Almighty's accountant or attorney. But with that being said, in the question, Rabbi Pilichowski, you phrased it so well. There's the what and the why. And many of you are familiar with the approaches. It starts with a Rambam. It actually starts with Chazal. It's a Rambam, but all the way through Rabbi Soloveitchik. There's a book out called Out of the Whirlwind. Out of the Whirlwind, the Rav has a number of essays that deal with tragedy. Okay, and in one of those essays, he develops the Jewish, so to speak, philosophy or approach to tragedy. And that is, we deal with the what, not the why. And it's for you and I to sit and speculate as to why God is doing that, since we're not God and we're not his accountant and he hasn't told us. It's by definition impossible. But what is very feasible, what is very possible, is to deal with the what, meaning now that we're in this situation, in this scenario, so what do we learn from that? How do we grow from that? What does it say to us? What abilities do we have in our experience of introspection and reflection to change on an individual level, on a communal level, etc.? And I think in that area, there is no one answer because it's all a function of an individual community. It's a function of an individual person. Just a few ideas to throw out, and feel free to push back if you don't like, some of the things that I'm going to say. We've had a problem, and that is that you have a situation where people are so disconnected from each other and connected to technology, which is it's a fabricated world, the technological world. You're not reading body language, you're not making eye contact. The fact that people have to actually spend time in the same home with family, where parents have to talk to children, siblings to each other, kids to parents, to bond in a way that is a much more healthy way. Historically, if you look at the history of humanity, the amount of time that we spend out of the house on a given day, I'm not referring to a business trip. I'm talking about any day when someone's working at home. Even when they're home, they're not home. What this does is it forces us to, I would say, appreciate the relationships that we have that are the most integral in terms of that which shapes us emotionally, religiously, and psychologically, the parent-child relationship, the sibling relationship. And if we can take this experience of quarantine, because most of us are in quarantine, hopefully we can do that. The second thing is there's a certain appreciation that we don't have. I mean, Rav Aaron Kahn, the great Talmud of Rabbi Soloveitchik, the tefillah of Rifa'enu Hashem b'nei Rafeh. You've got that phrase. And then you say, V'alei refuah shleima l'chol makoseinu. What's the repetition there? And then in between the two, you have what? You have the ki tehillasenu ata. So there's two components to refuah, to God's role in refuah. One is the obvious that we are aware of. If someone, God forbid, is suffering from cancer, if someone's suffering from Parkinson's, we ask God to give us a refuah shalema. But what's the beginning of Rifa'enu Hashem b'nei Rafeh? What is that? It's a statement that, each and every day we have an immune system that prevents us from getting cancer because there was a metastasizing of some cell out of its place, that prevents us from getting the flu, that prevents us from getting various diseases. The bacteria, the viruses that are in the air that we're not even aware of because our body is constantly, our body is constantly, attacking them. And we're not even aware that we're being saved from that. That is ki tehillasenu ata. In other words, it's that small sense of appreciation, that profound basic appreciation that, our whole biosystem, our whole, on a macro level, the organism that we call ourselves, the human being, is really a miracle. And if I could use another analogy from Modin, Khan also mentioned this, Al nisecha shebechol yom imanu aniflasecha, right? Erev vavoker v'tzaharayim. What are the miracles God is doing for us each and every day? Well, because we have an immune system, prevents us from getting pneumonia, it prevents us from getting cancer. We only appreciate it when we get sick, but that's working each and every day. And we just run through the davening. We take so much for granted. So this profound ability now to appreciate the system that God has given us when we realize how vulnerable we really are. I think that's a second what that we get out of this. And again, I think there are people smarter than me, wiser than me, that could come up with 10 or 12 other whats during this period of reflection.
Right. I think most of all, it's important is that people actually take the time and don't run away to their phones and don't run away to the internet and recognize that the person across the table from them is somebody that they might not have been spending so much time with. To talk to your first point and put down the phone and look at them and maybe go for a walk and spend some time with them and take advantage of a horrific time, but at least the benefit of it is, as you're saying.
I think there's another phenomena, and that's whether it's someone gets their news from their phone, whether someone gets their news from the news channels. Look, they're in the business of keeping you attached. You know what I mean? They only sell commercials the more that you spend, obsessed with this. And they hype things. And I'm not looking to make short shrift or make light of what we're going through. But you and I know that what they do is they play into people's worst anxieties and fears and into mass hysteria. And there has to be a perspective, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in the States, whether it's on the European continent. The CDC, the Israeli Health Ministry, they've given very good advice. We're not happy with it because it's not something that we can do in 20 minutes and move on with it. But you follow that advice and the curve changes. But we don't like that, and we love to play into mass hysteria and play politics with it. And that's a problem. That's not the response to this. If you follow the advice, think about it. And I don't mean to be giving mussar or here to preaching, but if you just follow the advice, the opportunity, whether it's to learn, to read a profound book, to have real conversations, we're actually being afforded a tremendous opportunity that I don't know if we're taking advantage of. Right.
It definitely doesn't seem that most people are, but being stuck in my house, hopefully I'm missing it, and people really are taking advantage. It's interesting because you mentioned listening to advice, and and if I could stay on the subject of Corona a little, we're seeing something that's very strange. That you see people that are very religious minded, very observant of the Torah, and their rabbis are telling them, stay home, don't pray with a minyan, don't go to the Beit Knesset, and then all of a sudden they're seeming holier than thou, and they're not listening to the advice of their rabbis. They're saying, I know better, I can go ahead and participate in a whole minyan, even if the rabbi insists that he locks the doors of the synagogue. You're a former congregational rabbi. You advise and mentor many congregational rabbis today, and talk to communities all the time. How are we seeing this phenomenon, and what do you suggest? How we go about
it? It hurts both of us, and it hurts many others to see the terrible Chilul Hashem, where you have people, that are violating the guidelines not only of their rabbis, but they're violating the guidelines of the CDC or of the Israeli Health Ministry, that is not in this for politics, that is giving the best possible advice they know. in the case of both of those institutions, if they realize they've given wrong advice, they change it. They're not standing on their original positions. You see how flexible it is. And for somebody, you know, that, so to speak, claims to represent God and the Masorah and the tradition, to act in a brazen, arrogant way, I mean, the tragedy is that, you know, religion works when it fits my ego, or religion works when it fits my fantasies. And you have a lot of people acting in a very inappropriate, non-religious way. You know, this is not religion. In the Chazal, we're very critical of this. You see this in Koheles, you see this in Mishlei and other places, that Chazal were very critical of people who used religion as a kardom lachporba, you know, as a weapon with which to manipulate with. That's a big problem.
Okay, that's I think it's underlying a lot of tension in communities, and I'm happy that, you know, that we have you on, that you can explain to us from a perspective of somebody that's been on both sides of the fence and understands it very well. So
I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, I happen to see, and that's because they put it on their official website. You know, Chabad was bragging that 770 was open. We're having minyanim. We've got signs out that anyone over 65 shouldn't come, but we're open. And, you know, and they show people hugging, dancing together and in close quarters, touching each other. You know, well, the state comes in and shuts them down. And again, I'm not looking this to attack Lubavitch, because it's not the only place. The only reason I'm saying that is because they put it on the official website. You know, a day later, 2 days later, they have to say, well, we're temporarily closed, you know, after bragging that, you know, we're staying open. But, you know,
and with hundreds of people coming down with coronavirus there.
Right now in Crown Heights, they have a machla. It's terrible because they haven't followed the guidelines. And again, They're not the only ones. But, you know, again, what is religion all about? You know, it's a system of chachma. It's a system of wisdom. What happens to the nishmartem od lenafsho seichem? What happens to the rapo yerape? You can't, you know, in the name of in the ego, in the name of defiance, in the name of, you know, I'm smarter and I know better. You know, what gadol hador did they go to for a psak to do that? Again, and they're not the only ones. The only reason I'm using them is because they put it on their website.
Right. I hear. Okay, let's switching gears a little. You're a huge fan of Daf Yomi. You've been doing Daf Yomi for a couple of cycles, from just my personal experience with you, and you see tremendous advantages in Daf Yomi. This is probably the most popular cycle of Daf Yomi that's ever been since its beginning. What are the advantages of that you see of Daf Yomi, both for the layman and for the Talmid Chacham to be involved in?
So I would put a caveat. I don't think Daf Yomi is the right approach for everyone. And I think Daf Yomi is only a complement at a certain age. I didn't start learning Daf Yomi till I was in my 40s. I didn't feel I would gain from it. Daf Yomi only works if a person is going to be very serious in terms of the review, in terms of the deeper analysis. You're familiar, we created this app called All Daf. Mm-hmm. Thanks to the largesse of an anonymous donor, we are able to put a fortune of money in terms of getting some of the world's best Talmidei Chachamim. Whether it is lamdus on the daf, history on the daf, analysis of the psukim on the daf, whether it is an analysis of the Tosfos, the key Rishonim and Achronim underlined so that somebody, you know, can go deeper into it. I only think Daf Yomi has a value if it's right for a person. I don't think it's an elixir. I think there are way too many people who learn it that would gain much more from learning on a deeper level. And I think it only works as a complement to people's others. Let me say this differently, to the other siddharim or the other engagement in their growth as a Jew. It should never be the primary, unless, you know, they're the rare individual who's spending, you know, 6-7 hours a day learning the daf, learning it seriously, analyzing each havamina maskana, analyzing the Rishonim. If you're not doing that, then Daf Yomi is only a complement to your more deeper learning.
Interesting. Okay, that's fascinating. What are some of the you've heard a lot of shiurim, you're involved in this Aladaf app that came out. What are some of the more popular shiurim that you would suggest people try as a first try at Daf Yomi?
So it's a good question. We put on, after doing a lot of research, we put on what we thought were the world's top shiurim. I'll just a tidbit. After we set up all DAF, and thank God we have way over 30,000 downloads. In what's happening is people are using it not just for DAF Yomi, they're using it to when they're learning something on a much deeper level because of all the complementary components to it and the easy access to everything. What I would say is this: we did a lot of research. There's Rabbi Moshe Elephant, Rabbi Shalom Rosner, who lives in Beit Shemesh, has a shul Nofei Shemesh, oversees the Karen B'Yavne's American program, and Rabbi Sruli Bornstein of Lakewood DAF. He has an amazing group of people in Lakewood as well as a following all over the world. So Rabbi Rosner, Rabbi Bornstein, and Rabbi Sruli Bornstein, Rabbi Elephant. And the fourth that we put up there is Rabbi Leibowitz, Aryeh Leibowitz from Yeshiva University. I listen to three of them. I listen to Rabbi Elephant, Rabbi Rosner, and Rabbi Bornstein every day.
Every day.
Every day, I listen to all three. So far in the new cycle, until the new cycle, I've listened to Rabbi Elephant and Rabbi Rosner every day for 2 cycles. Now I'm listening to all three. And what they do is, each of them has a unique, distinct style. When you get from Rabbi Bornstein, Rabbi Rosner, you're going to get lumdus on the daf. From Rabbi Elephant, Rabbi Rosner, Rabbi Bornstein, you're going to get, key raid, key analysis of crucial topics on the daf, not just obscure topics. So that, for instance, if there's a topic that has ramifications, halachically, that has ramifications for 4 other Gemaras, or that is defining in terms of an area of Jewish law, because it's a defining sugya, they're going to supplement. We also have, again, with the lumdus on the daf, with daf sugyas, we have the ability to go deeper with sources. So my goal in all daf is that the learner will have the opportunity to explore vistas. Whether it's the history of the daf, to understand an obscure phrase that's used in the Gemara, to understand a historical background, or to get a biography of one of the Tanaim or Moraim. Whether it's psukim on the daf, it's a huge mistake when the Gemara is only giving you a mari makom. It's only quoting you a source. If you don't know what the source is in terms of pshuto shemikra, in its context, what that source is doing, and then what Chazal were doing it, taking it out of the pshuto shemikra, why they took it out of pshuto shemikra, to teach you either a halachic, a psychological, or a philosophical principle. If you can't appreciate that, then you don't know what the Gemara is doing, and you don't understand the lumdus of what the Gemara is doing. So we have Rabbi Trump doing that. Again, I have a bias, a personal subjective nagia, because I've been involved in the creation of this for 2 years, this all daf. But our goal is, whether you're a daf learner and preferably not a daf learner, it gives you the ability to go deeper and to go wider in whatever you're learning.
That's fascinating. One of the things that I think that not many people know about you is, you give an amazing lesson in Jewish history. You'll focus on a certain event, or you'll focus on a certain personality, and you'll do a deep dive into them that goes, and a lot of times you have, especially when it comes to rabbis, they take a superficial approach to personalities and figures in Jewish history. They'll check out a Wikipedia page, maybe they have a book at home that talks about somebody, and there's countless times, I know on your visits to Israel, you'll tell me that you just spent 6-7 hours with some scholar, a professor at Hebrew University, or Michael Oren, to truly understand the event in history. And then and your whole lecture might only be 45 minutes on the person. And you've done 10, 20, 30 hours worth of research for that lecture. I'm sure that you've given speeches on people in Jewish history that had tremendous impacts, or people that we really should know about, that the average person, that's with us tonight wouldn't have heard of. Can you give us 1 or 2 people that we should be looking into, and why we should be looking into them?
Well, I would rather give you one resource that I think will give people, it's a much better resource than I am. I'm happy to talk to anyone about this. The man's name is Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi David Katz was a Talmud of Ruderman. His father was a huge Talmud Chacham from Lithuania who survived, rebuilt his life, remarried in America. He is a professor at Johns Hopkins University. He's a Rav in Baltimore. There's a I think on the podcast, it's called Rabbi David Katz with Jewish History. They're starting to put his material. Well, we put it up at the OU Torah, outorah.org, and it's also on YouTube. Some of his lectures. This man is, besides being a world-class Talmud Chacham, just to give you an example, he wrote a perush to the Igeris of Reb Shri Ragon in terms of what's the whole nature of the Masorah. He was one of the scholars that Art Scroll used for some of the more difficult prokim like Parak Chelek, when they did the Gemaras. He's a unique, special mind. He also happens to be fascinating. What he does is once a week, he'll do a biography of someone. Let's say, you get those emails, whose yortzeit is this week? Gives you the yortzeit of the day. Manny Saltiel does a beautiful thing. He sends it out.
I spoke to Manny today.
Yeah, you did. Okay. So he'll take a yortzeit of that week and he'll give you an insight, whether it's Rabbi Yaakov Reischer, the Shmooz Yaakov, whether it is, the Maharam of Rothenburg, whether it is one of the great Italian Achronim, whether it's fascinating figures, and he'll give you a context to what they were dealing with, the issues they were dealing with, who they were and how they dealt with them. Whether it's the Maharal, right? Whether it's the, it could be the Rebbe Lezer Fleckless, the Tshuva Me'ava. It could, you name it, whether it's Czechoslovakia, whether it's Lita, whether it's Poland, whether it's Galicia, whether it's Italy, whether it's Morocco. So you get a sense not only of this great scholar, but his impact on shaping Jewish history. Again, anyone can come to me, and I do a lot of work on it. Shalavicha v'yagedcha zekenecha v'yomrulach, the famous pasuk in Hazinu, about we're supposed to derive principles from previous experiences. And we're a people of history. We're a people of 4,000 years of history. And we, how do I say this? Because we have this sense of history, that's what ultimately gives us wisdom and the ability to deal with issues. Because there were giants that we sit on their shoulders from the past and we can learn from. But as much as I can say that maybe I'm an orator, or maybe I make it interesting or dynamic, he's a much better resource than I am, this Rabbi David Katz. And try out his podcast, listen to some of his lectures. I mean, I'll give you simple examples. What was it like under the Jews under Tsarist Russia? Okay, throughout that period and the various czars, and how did that shape all of modern Jewish history? Whether it's socialism, Zionism, whether it's a Haskalah, the whole notion of the Jews in France, leading up to the French Revolution, and the impact the French Revolution had on all of Europe, not just all of humanity, but the reason I say all of Europe, because of the impact it had on the Jews throughout Europe. Because the reverberations of what happened in France as a consequence of the revolution, the aftermath of the revolution, whether it's Napoleon, Sanhedrin, etc., and then the impact that had and the ripple effects that had, because there was a rebound, there was a nationalistic rebound as a consequence of that. Those kind of things he deals with, and it frames all of our learning, it frames all of our perspective. And when we see things that are happening today, it's not in a vacuum. There's a context that drove this.
Interesting.
I mean, a simple example. You ever notice there's no reform or conservative movement amongst Sephardim or Syrians or Persians? Why not? Why is that an Ashkenazic phenomena? And why is it something that we relate, meaning Ashkenazic Jews were attracted to, whereas with the Sephardim, it never spoke to them. It was meaningless. It was a corruption of the system, no matter how observant or unobservant they were. It's simple things like that. If you have a sense of history, it contextualizes everything that's happening. And in my opinion, and I know Malcolm Hoenlein feels this way, I know Beryl Wine feels this way, it gives you a perspective of how to deal with today's issues and ultimately to keep your eye on the bullseye. And when we drive Israel, when we drive the diaspora community policy-wise, what should be the focus and what's just noise?
Interesting. That's fascinating. Okay, we're running out of time here, so I want to skip to this. I had a bunch of questions here that I wanted to ask you, but I'm an American. I live in Israel, and you're an American. You live in America with a great love of Israel. And here we're feeling somewhat of a division between our community and the American Jewish community here. And I know Rabbi Gordis has written a book about this, and it's sort of like today with Corona and the elections and everything, it's sort of taken headed down a little, but there's this underlying tension that we feel. There's a division between the two communities. Could you speak to that and give us maybe a historical perspective and where you see it going in the future?
I think it's only a manifestation. It's a symptom of a greater cause. Look, most American Jews, I'm working off of the Pew from 2013. Let's say Jews today under 50, 63% are unaffiliated, no affiliation whatsoever. 12% are Reform, and in only 2/3 of all those who affiliate Reform attend one service a year at a Reform congregation. So you're not dealing with a lot of affiliation there as well. That's 75% of American Jewry. In those two categories, both the Reform and the unaffiliated, 83% are marrying someone who does not identify as a Jew. No marriage, no conversion whatsoever. Halachic, non-halachic, nothing. What's my point? They're so far removed. Their religion is whatever the flavor of the month is in progressive America, in liberal America. And I'm not here to attack liberal America. That's not my point. My point is that's their religion. Very much like many Jews, socialism was their religion. It wasn't Judaism. So Israel's not going to fit into that. It just isn't. And that's a tragedy. And Israel's not doing anything wrong. Israel should be doing this and Israel should be doing that. But those are excuses. It's a function of it's not part of their whole worldview. Now, the positive is, Birthright has done a number of studies on itself. But I'll give you one fascinating study. Two facts. Number one, consistently, no matter where the background, no matter where the young woman or young man is geographically located, consistently amongst American and Canadian Birthright participants, the number one experience, the number one positive they write about their experience on Birthright was the relationships they created with the Israeli participants on the bus, the connection that they have with their Israeli peers. What does that tell you? That tells you that if they only spend time in Israel or with Israelis, fantastic results. Number two, which is an important fact, in the Pew, unaffiliated American Jews between the ages of 18 and 19. Now, again, we're going back 6-7 years. I think it would be even stronger today. But 18 to 29-year-old unaffiliated Jews, when they ask you, what defines you being a Jew? And as what factors? Only 29% said Israel, connection with Israel. In that same group, Jews who are unaffiliated between 18 to 29 that went to Israel once. Now, what unaffiliated Jew went to Israel once? They didn't go for a bar bat mitzvah because they didn't have a bar bat mitzvah. They went on a birthright. 10 days, 9 nights sleeping in the country. It spikes from 29% to 62% in 9 nights in the country. So you connect Americans and Israelis. If they experience each other, there's a great connection, and that will still stand. It's not Israel.
Right. I hear.
It's a manifestation of where they're at.
So are we destined to just lose those people that are not taking the birthright trips? How do we forge this division? How do we get rid of it? How do we affiliate those that are unaffiliated with Israel and with their Judaism?
So because I didn't have a chance, it's not like I've thought about these questions or answers, so I'm shooting from the hip, but I want to say something. I would ask people to read a book called The Coddling of the American Mind. The Coddling of the American Mind. It describes what's happening on the campuses today. It describes, I'll call it the Bernie Sanders voters, who are the most passionate Bernie Sanders people, okay? They don't mention Bernie Sanders, but it's all a manifestation of the way they were raised, the technology they were raised on, etc. And it's a complicated, there are many factors that go into why not the millennials, we're talking about younger than the millennials, Generation I or the I generation, why they work and function. I'm talking about psychologically why they work. They're not working yet, but psychologically why they function the way they do, okay? And what I'm saying is, looking at that population, I apologize for being speaking in a down way. I think one of the great ways of changing this is the terribly, terribly rampant anti-Semitism that is affecting the college campuses, that are affecting young people today. And let me make this clear. They're not coming to Judaism because they've been exposed to substance, to the sophistication, the beauty, the wisdom of the system. Unfortunately, they haven't been exposed to anything. They're not pro, they're not anti-Jewish. It's just irrelevant to them. What's happening is that anti-Semitism, very much like the German community that was so assimilated in the 1930s, the Third Reich drove a lot of these people back to Judaism because they were ostracized from the world that they worshiped, that they loved, that became their new temple and their new religion. And I see anti-Semitism on the campus shaking up a lot of these young people. Look, we're spending tens of millions of dollars every year with us and our funding partners targeting that population. We do it on an adolescent level, the JSU network, that part of NCSY. And you, because you're an educator who's had a huge impact on them, you see the impact the experience has on them when they come to Israel, etc. I'm saying that one of the ways of changing this is going to be anti-Semitism. Now, why am I speaking so negatively? If they're not associated with a youth movement, with a Jewish educational experience, with a Jewish communal experience, so they're not going to get it from the community. What's going to drive them is not the internal exposure that you and I had such a rich experience in our, formative years. What's going to drive them is going to be what drove a lot of the former socialist and communist Jews in Russia. The very religion that they worshipped rejected them and despised them. That's that happened to many women on the women's movement, what Linda Sarsour and the others did to them. And I feel that's what's going to happen to a lot of young Jews on the campus and in the graduate programs, that the very religion that they worship ultimately is rejecting them, is spitting back in their face.
That's bleak and it's difficult to hear, but the logic is sound, and I appreciate it. So, Rabbi Weil, this is a real treat. Anytime that I get to spend with you is always a pleasure. Although the next time hopefully you should be here in Israel and on our porch here and enjoying some good product of Havana, Nicaragua, and Scotland, and Israeli whiskey now. So, it's really a real pleasure having you, and I appreciate the time that you took to be here with us. And I thank you tremendously. Thank you, and I'm sure everybody that was watching got a lot of chizuk, a lot of understanding, a lot of homework in terms of Daf Yomi Shiurim and Jewish history lessons to look at.
And the coddling of the American mind.
And the coddling of the American mind. So we've got a lot of reading material. I hope everybody will join us tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we have President Obama's ambassador to Israel, Ambassador Daniel Shapiro, with us tomorrow. I hope you'll join us tomorrow night. Rabbi Weil, thank you very, very much. And a good, healthy, and safe night to all. Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you.